Hey guys, we're not in the garage today, but it's a Friday, probably around 8 o'clock New York time. I hope you guys had a great week. I'm going to try to do this every Friday, maybe around 8, 9 o'clock. Just post some of the cars that we've done in this small garage and show you how doable these cars are. They really are. Not all the cars that I show you today are going to be what I've done in that garage. I have plenty of pictures to show you of some of the cars that I've done in the garage. A few of them I did right in front of my house, right out in the street. So take a look at this one car right here. A buddy of mine was in Maryland. He was visiting family, and this was in the morning. This was a Saturday morning. I wake up. Every one of these stories are going to start out with, there I was having my cup of coffee. So there I was having my cup of coffee, just browsing, seeing what's out there, and I come across this car. So I called my buddy. I said, "Hey, listen, where in Maryland are you?" And it might have been Clearwater or Edgewater or something like that. That's where the car was. So I asked him, like, "Would you mind going to take a look at that car for me?" He's like, "Yeah, that's about 15 minutes away from me." So he goes, he takes a look at the car, and I end up buying the car. My friend gives him a deposit, I buy the car, and I pick the car up, I think on a Monday. So I go get it, and the car it wasn't really as described. So, but listen, I committed to buying the car. If I tell you I'm buying it, I'm buying it. So I buy the car. It needed a motor and things like that, but I kind of knew that ahead of time. So I bring the car back to my little garage, and it ended up I had to change the motor in the car, and I ended up just kind of changing the car around. So take a look at this car. Yeah, I end up buying a car that I just wanted to touch up, just make it a nice, decent driver, and then move him on down the road. And ended up, I painted the car. I didn't paint it, my buddy Joe painted it for me. And I just SS cloned it. I gave it a little bit of jewelry, and it made it look pretty. And, it just went from a car that I went just to doll it up a little bit and then move it on down the road to a car that I ended up redoing the whole thing, changing the motor and tranny and everything like that. But it ended up turning out pretty decent. And it's funny because a lot of these cars that I've sold through the years, I see a lot of them for sale, or I see a lot of people, they post them. Hey, I bought this car from New York, and years. So as a matter of fact, I have a car that I'll show you that it just reminded me. I'm going to post it in the next video of a car that I had purchased. And about 5 years later, the gentleman posted it on Facebook about a car that he bought from New York. And I contacted him, and I told him more about the car than he knew. And I said, yeah, that was my car. I put that car together. So, yeah, that was the black car that I just showed you. That was an interesting car. It went from being something maybe just to clean up to move down the road to something I ended up redoing the whole thing. Because for some reason, that light bulb goes off in my head. I'm like, maybe I can build it. And then I get crazy and I end up building it. So here's another car that I want to show you. This car I bought, I think in New Hampshire. And it was online for a long time. And it was a shame because take a look at the pictures and let me know what you think of this car, okay? Okay, so I go and look at this car, and a lot of times I tell you guys, I'm like, the car, it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as it looked. But that was the case with this car. It really wasn't as bad as it looked. What happened was he started taking the car apart, didn't know how to put the car back together. And it's a shame because that car had a brand new aluminum head small block, brand new turbo 350 tranny. I believe the rear wasn't new, but it had, I believe, 355 gears, posi rear in the car. So I looked at the car and I'm like, wow, this car really isn't that bad. It looked like Frankenstein, but it wasn't that bad. My parts guy had all the parts for me, and I figured, this isn't a bad car to put together and make it just, it already ran. You couldn't drive it because of the condition that it was in. But I ended up doing all the work to that car. But I'm almost embarrassed to tell you this. Take a look at what I did with this car. Like I say, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you, that car I painted with Rustoleum. I bought a gallon of Rustoleum paint. My buddy's like, Al, just add the hardener to it and the shine enhancer to it. He's like, and you're going to be surprised at how good that car comes out. I'm like, let's give it a try. Why not? I felt the car was just sitting there, and I'm like, you know what? I just finished off the body work. I did it really fast. I sanded it down. It was sitting in my driveway. It was early in the morning, maybe around 10 o'clock in the morning on a cool day. It wasn't cold, it was just a nice, comfortable day. And the light bulb goes off. I'm looking around. None of my neighbors are home. So I run out in the street. I put plastic down. I roll the car on there. I drag my compressor out. I painted that car in about 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes from start to finish, because it didn't need any primer. You just painted right over everything. And it came out pretty nice. I was shocked. And, I'm like, I didn't want to show you this, but I have a few cars that I painted with Rustoleum paint that came out pretty decent. If you want, I'll show it on the next Friday. I'll show it on that. I got I got one car that was a mess that I painted with Rustoleum, and it actually came out pretty decent. So I wanted to show you, sometimes don't be afraid to try. If somebody says, try Rustoleum, if you could tell you the right way to do it, really didn't come out bad. It really didn't. So I just figured you'd find that story a little funny. Here's another car. I bought this car. It was local. A lot of people stayed away from it because the back of it looked like it was almost like it slammed into a fire hydrant, like 2 fire hydrants wide or something. So it pushed the back panel in. Didn't touch the trunk. It was below the trunk. So it pushed the back panel in. The quarters were a little rough. So I ended up doing some work to it. I ended up buying the car. The car ran. I ended up bringing the car home, and I did this car, I think, maybe a half a day. Let's say a day. It took me about a day to take this car apart and put it back together to where somebody can actually drive the car, or finish it. So take a look at it. Yeah, that car, that was another car. I wish I had pictures of the car before I took it apart, but I lost a lot of my photos, and I'm still trying to dig up some of the photos that I had, of some of the cars that I've done. I still have a good amount of photos, but there were so many more, and I'm hoping to find them. So I bought that car locally, sit in the back. People shied away from it because, between it needing the back panel and the quarters and things like that, people stayed away from it, but it was a running car. So I bring the car home. I tear the back part of the car, I tear it apart. I put the back panel back on, I hang new quarters on it, and I was going to paint that car burgundy, but a buddy of mine passed by, he saw it, he's like, hey, listen, Al, I'll buy it the way it is. So he ended up buying the car for me, and I wish I would have built that car, because that was a neat little car. I think it would have looked really nice, maybe a nice burgundy or something like that, maybe with like the hockey stripe that comes down the side. That's what I was going to do with that car. So I think he still has that car, actually. I bought that car thinking I'm going to build it, and I didn't. It's just like some cars I buy thinking I'm not going to build them, and I build them. So I literally go from one end of the spectrum to the other on certain things. So that was that car. But, a lot of times I say timing's everything. Here's a story on this car. My son was in the Marines. He was in Jacksonville, North Carolina. While he was down there, he went to a wedding. On the way back, his friend drove. My son was drinking. He's like, I'm not going to drive. I've been drinking. So his friend drives. His friend falls asleep, drives the car into the woods, and wrecks it. So this was a Friday night. So I said, you know what? I had a car here. I said, what I'll do is I'll throw that car in a trailer. and I'll bring it down to my son, and then I'll just pick up his car and bring his car back. But my wife wanted to go, a friend. So they said, you know what? We'll drive the car down to Maryland. Now I'm going to tell you the story. I'm sitting in front of my house. A gentleman drives up to me. He says, you know, I have a car that I'm looking to get rid of. He's like, the insurance company paid out on it, but it wasn't a total. He bought the car back or something like that. I forgot what it was, but it wasn't considered a total. So it had a regular title. So it was like, if you're interested in it, I'll bring it over here. Take a look at it. If you're interested in buying it, you know, I'm really just looking to get rid of it. I said, okay, great. So he leaves. I'm still getting ready to go down to North Carolina. I had my trailer hooked up to my truck. I was going to put the other car on a trailer and bring it down to me to drop it off to my son. So he comes back with this car on a trailer, and take a look at this car. So I'm sitting, getting ready to go, and he pulls up on the trailer with that car. The picture that you see, that was off the trailer. We offloaded the car off the trailer, and then the next picture was it going on my trailer. So he brings the car to my house, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that car, it was hitting the front. Something happened with the brakes, and he ran into the back of another car. The rest of the car was spotless. Underneath the car, even under the hood, it was all stock original interior, super, super clean car. So I'm looking at the car. I'm going to North Carolina. A good buddy of mine lives in Maryland. We go back and forth. We buy cars back and forth, him and I. So I work out a deal with the gentleman with the red Camaro. I send pictures to my buddy in Maryland. We work out a price. I loaded the car right on my trailer. I drive down to Maryland. I drop the car off. I meet my wife and a friend there. We load their car up onto the trailer. We had a nice, like a late lunch, early dinner, and we cruised on down to Jacksonville, North Carolina. But I always say timing's everything. How crazy is I was leaving to go down that way anyway, and it was literally 15 minutes out of my way. So it's just, like I say, timing's everything. So that was that car right there. So now, this car that I'm going to show you now is a really, really interesting story, I think. It was probably one of the most craziest situations I was in. And I've been in a lot of crazy situations. So the story on this car was, Mr. Wilson and we were talking about this car. I sent it over to him and he sent it over to me. I'm not sure. Yeah, he sent it over to me. And I look at it. He calls me later on that evening. He's like, so what do you think of that car, Al? I'm like, I think it needs a lot of work. He's like, well, we have all the parts. I'm like, no, I know we have all the parts, but it's a lot of work. So he's like, take a look at the car. It's not as bad as you think. If you look deep into the car, it didn't seem so bad. So that was that evening. The next morning, like I say, there I was having my cup of coffee. I'm looking at the pictures. I'm like, you know, let me just contact this guy. So I contact the guy, and let me show you pictures of this car first, because of the story about this car is kind of interesting. All right, so take a look at these pictures of the car that I went to go get and the condition of this car. Here we go. That car needed everything, but we had everything. And every now and then, Mr. Wilson and I will get together to see how fast we could put a car together. So, but I'll tell you how long it took us to put that car together. But I got to tell you the story about this car. So the next morning, like I say, here I am, had my cup of coffee. I contact the gentleman. It ends up, the gentleman that had placed the ad, it wasn't his car. It was his friend's car. Let's call his friend John. So I'm speaking to this gentleman. He's like, listen, John owns the car. I'm going to give you his number. He's a really nice guy, but he's a little eccentric, I guess. So I really didn't know what he meant by it. He's like, but Al, don't. He's like, he's a nice guy. He's like, he might seem a little off a little bit, but he's a nice guy. So I spoke to him on the phone. I spoke to John on the phone. And he was right. He seemed like a really nice guy to talk to on the phone. He gives me his address. So this was on a Thursday. He gives me his address. So I drive there on a Thursday. I take the address, and there I am. I put it in my phone. I drive straight to where he gave it to me. And I pull up, and what do I see? I see a massive dump site, an active dump site, construction vehicles and everything. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. So I call him up. I call John up. I go, hey, John, I'm over at the address you gave me. Did you give me the right address? He's like, oh, yeah, I did. He's like, he's like, are you looking at the dump site right now? I go, yeah. He's like, turn to your left. You're going to see an old gate and a dirt road with bushes around it. There's going to be a chain. There's a sign, do not enter, a big lock on it. He's like, it's not locked. Just open up the gate, drive your vehicle through it, close the gate, make it look like it's locked. So I go there with my buddy, and I'm like, is this where it ends? I'm like, I felt like I was being punked or something. So sure enough, I pull the vehicle through there. I shut the gate. I notified Mr. Wilson, let him know where I was, just to God forbid something were to happen. So take a look at this road that I was driving down. It started out wide. The first picture, it starts out wide. But as I go down further, it got super narrow to where I just barely got my truck and my trailer through it. So as I'm driving through, I look on the left, a lot of woods. I see this abandoned old house. The doors open, no window. It was creepy looking. Down on the right, maybe another 50 yards, there was those two that you see. There were two more of those right there. And I'm like, oh boy, it was just really, really creepy. I'm going to be honest with you. If it was dark out, I probably wouldn't have gone, because it was creepy with the sun out. It was really, really creepy. So I'm driving, and I turn to my buddy. I'm like, this is really creepy. And I'm like, I don't even know. I was at the point of no return because I couldn't back up all the way. This was probably about a quarter of a mile long, at least a quarter of a mile long. So sure enough, I pull out to that opening. You see that big barn? And if you look to the left, you'll see that Camaro on the back of a flatbed, just hanging halfway off. So I pull in, and I'm looking around, and I see this gentleman walk out. It was all dirt. There was no concrete there or anything. This gentleman walks out. And he comes up to me. He's like, hey, how you doing? I'm John. And I'm talking to him. He's like, I'm like, this is quite an interesting place you have here. He says, you want to know the story about this place? One day, I was hiking through the woods, and I came across this house. So he stayed there. There was no electric there, nothing. He stayed in that house for 30 years. He didn't know who owned it. He didn't even care who owned it. He stayed there for 30 years. It ended up, the town owned it. The town used to use it for something way back, First World War or something like that. And they abandoned it, and I guess they forgot about it. And I guess maybe they were just redoing their survey or something like that, and they stumbled across him living in the house. He was there for 30 years. They couldn't get rid of him. So they worked out a deal with him. He had to knock down the barn. So, because the barn was just a mess. It was coming apart. So I'm sitting there, I'm talking, and I'm listening to this story. And I look down, and he's wearing socks. Dirty socks. So he's like, yeah, I'm wearing socks. He's like, believe it or not, I almost died. I got some type of infection, and I almost died. And I'm like, why are you wearing socks? So he told me the story of how he was in the house, and he thought it was haunted. So they had called a priest in, I guess, to do an exorcism or something like that. The next day, this is sad, the next day the priest passed away. It was just a very creepy house. So I end up buying the car from this gentleman. It ended up, it wasn't going to be the end of our day. You know, it was actually true. We take my trailer, I back it up to that flatbed. He tilts the trailer and we slide it onto my trailer. He tilts the bed and slides it onto my trailer. I bolt it down and I bring it home. But halfway home, I'm thinking, how am I going to get this car off the trailer? You know, because I put wood down and we slid it on there. So, you know, I call Mr. Wilson on the way home. He's like, Alex, like, just bring it straight here. He's like, we'll put it together right here. We'll get it together. I said, okay. So I bring it to Mr. Wilson's. And from the time that car was still on the trailer and I started cutting it apart, that was Friday morning. It took us one day to put that car together. From the time you saw it on the trailer till the time you see it in the primer, it took us one day to get that car together. But man, I got to tell you, that driving into that place to go get that car, it was the creepiest feeling I ever had. So, but that's kind of a few of the cars that I've had. You know, a lot of those were done in my little garage. A lot of them were done right in front of my house. And some of them were just, you know, came in one hand and out the other, you know, just doing certain things to it to get it to the point to where a lot of people, like that 68 Camaro, a lot of people were afraid of it because, oh, it needed quarter panels, it needed that tail panel, it needed this. But to show you, these cars are so doable. And you see the tools I use. I don't use anything crazy. I'm old school. You give me a good tree, I'll yank a motor out with it, you know. It's just, that's what we did back then. But I just wanted to show you some of these pictures through the years. And I have a lot more. A gentleman had asked me, like, Al, have you ever done any Z28s? I did two Z28s. One I had done, and I'll show you in the next video. One was a nice cross ram setup. It came out, I think, just as nice as the dust blue one that went to Barrett Jackson. So, but I'll show you a couple of others next Friday. Like I say, if you guys enjoy these videos, I'll post them again, and because I enjoy making them, I really do, and I like to share. You know, just so you know, I have a Facebook account. I think it's Keep It Simple Garage. Like I said, I'm a computer illiterate. I'm terrible with this. And I have an Instagram account, Keep It Simple Garage. But, you know, and the reason why I wanted to try to do the Facebook was because a lot of people have a lot of interesting stories and interesting pictures and things like that. So they can kind of share it with everybody. So if you want to take a look on Facebook, I think it's Keep It Simple Garage. You'd think I would know because I set it up, but it took me probably 3 days to do it by the time I started and finished. I think I could build a car faster than I could post something.
Isn't set up yet. To get started, download the Google Home app on a phone or tablet.
Can't make this up. So hopefully we can share some pictures and you guys can bounce questions off each other. You know, I'm sure a lot of people, I'm going to be bouncing questions off you as well. I'm sure I will. Because like I say, I'm just like you guys. I'm a guy in a garage just doing cool shit. It's the stuff that I enjoy doing. And to me, like they say, you never worked a day in your life if you enjoy what you're doing. So I really feel like when I work on these cars, I'm not working. To me, it's just, I enjoy doing it. So like I say, if you want, I'll post, every Friday I'll post these videos. I'll post some of the cars that I painted in Rustoleum. And I'll show you that Z28 that I built. And I'll show you another car also. I'll show you some of the cars too, like I say, that I stumbled across the guys that I had done that they still have them. Well, enough babbling. I appreciate you guys watching. And you guys take care of yourselves. And have an awesome weekend.